In the quiet vault of a European library rests a book so large that two people are required to move it. Its pages are nearly a meter tall, its wooden covers are wrapped in thick leather, and when the manuscript is opened to one particular page, the viewer encounters something deeply unsettling. Full-page portrait of a horned figure staring out from the parchment. For centuries, people have whispered about this mysterious manuscript. Some believe it was created by a monk who sold his soul. Others say the book contains hidden knowledge that medieval scholars feared to write anywhere else. Historians regard it as one of the most extraordinary surviving artifacts of the Middle Ages. Yet most people know it by a far more dramatic name, the Devil's Bible. The true title of this manuscript is the Codex Gigas, a Latin phrase that means the giant book. It was created in the early 13th century somewhere in medieval Bohemia, a region that today forms part of the Czech Republic. Today, the manuscript is preserved in the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm, where it remains one of the most mysterious and fascinating relics of medieval Europe. Even in an age when digital libraries can contain millions of books, the Codex Gigas continues to inspire awe simply because of its sheer physical presence. The Codex Gigas is not merely large by medieval standards. It is the largest surviving medieval manuscript in the world. The book stands nearly 3 feet tall and weighs approximately 75 kilograms, or about 165 pounds. Its parchment pages were made from the skins of roughly 160 animals. To modern observers, it almost appears absurdly oversized, as though someone attempted to compress an entire medieval library into a single object. Yet that description is not far from the truth, because the Codex Gigas contains far more than a simple religious text. Inside its massive covers are the complete Latin Bible, along with a remarkable collection of additional works. Historical chronicles appear beside medical treatises. Encyclopedic writings sit alongside religious confessions and liturgical calendars. There are texts on medicine, records of Bohemian history, and even magical formulas believed to offer cures or protection. In effect, the Codex Gigas functions as a medieval knowledge archive, a single volume attempting to gather together sacred writings, historical understanding, and practical knowledge about the world. It is not just a Bible. It is a medieval intellectual universe preserved on parchment. Despite this vast range of content, most people remember the Codex Gigas for one extraordinary illustration. Within the pages of the manuscript appears a full-page portrait of the devil. The figure crouches alone against a blank background, creating an unsettling sense of isolation. His body is humanoid yet distorted, with claws instead of fingers, horns rising from his head, and 2 long red tongues protruding from his mouth. His eyes stare outward in a way that many viewers find deeply unnerving. Around his waist, he wears a patterned cloth that resembles ermine, a fabric traditionally associated with royalty. The effect is strange and symbolic. The devil is depicted as both monstrous and powerful, a ruler of darkness. What makes the image even more intriguing is its placement. Directly opposite the devil's portrait is another full-page illustration showing the heavenly city of Jerusalem. On one page, the viewer sees the symbol of divine salvation. On the facing page stands the embodiment of evil and temptation. Together, the images create a powerful visual contrast that medieval readers would have immediately understood. The 2 pages represent a moral choice, the eternal conflict between good and evil, heaven and damnation. Yet despite this clear symbolic meaning, the devil's portrait has inspired centuries of speculation. According to legend, the Codex Gigas was not created through ordinary means. The story begins in a monastery where a monk committed a terrible crime. The exact nature of the offense has never been clearly recorded. Some versions of the story claim he broke sacred vows, while others suggest he violated strict monastic rules or committed blasphemy. Whatever the truth may have been, the punishment imposed upon him was severe. The monk was sentenced to be immured, meaning he would be sealed alive within the walls of the monastery as a form of execution. Facing such a horrifying fate, the monk made a desperate promise to his fellow monks. He declared that he would create a book unlike any other ever written, a manuscript containing all human knowledge, if they would spare his life. The monks agreed, but they added a condition that made the task almost impossible. The book had to be completed in a single night. At first, the monk began writing with determination, hoping somehow to accomplish the task. But as the hours passed and dawn approached, he realized that the work was far too vast for any human to finish in one night. In desperation, according to the legend, he turned not to God, but to the devil. He prayed for supernatural assistance and offered his soul in exchange for help completing the manuscript. The devil accepted the bargain, and by morning the book was finished. In gratitude, or perhaps in acknowledgement of the pact, the monk painted the devil's portrait inside the pages of the manuscript. This dramatic story explains why the Codex Gigas became known as the Devil's Bible. Yet historians have long pointed out that the legend has no historical basis. In fact, modern analysis of the manuscript reveals something far more fascinating than the myth itself. The entire manuscript appears to have been written by a single scribe. The handwriting remains remarkably consistent throughout the book. The style of the lettering, the spacing of the lines, and the overall structure of the pages remain uniform from beginning to end. Researchers have estimated that if a scribe wrote just one column of text per day, it would take approximately 5 years simply to copy the words contained in the manuscript. However, writing was only part of the process. Preparing parchment, ruling pages, painting decorations, and correcting errors would have required enormous additional effort. When these factors are taken into account, historians believe the Codex Gigas likely took at least 20 to 30 years to complete. In other words, the manuscript was not written in a single night. It was created through decades of dedication and painstaking labor. The identity of the scribe remains uncertain. Some scholars have connected the manuscript to a monk known as Herman the Recluse, whose name appears in records associated with the monastery where the manuscript was once kept. However, there is no definitive evidence confirming that he was the author. Whoever the scribe may have been, his work demonstrates extraordinary discipline and perseverance. The Codex Gigas represents not only intellectual ambition, but also the remarkable patience required to devote decades of life to a single manuscript. Over time, the Codex Gigas traveled across Europe and became associated with several powerful figures. By the late 16th century, it had entered the collection of Emperor Rudolf II in Prague, a ruler famous for his fascination with unusual artifacts, astrology, and the occult. The mysterious Devil's Bible fit perfectly within his collection of strange and fascinating objects. Later, during the 30 Years' War in 1648, Swedish forces captured Prague and carried the manuscript back to Sweden as war booty. The Codex Gigas then entered the Swedish Royal Library, where it nearly faced destruction in one dramatic event. In 1697, a massive fire swept through the royal palace in Stockholm. As flames consumed the building, librarians rushed to rescue priceless manuscripts. The Codex Gigas was so heavy that it could not easily be carried down the stairs. Instead, someone reportedly threw the giant book out of a window in an attempt to save it. The manuscript survived the fall, though its binding was damaged. Even fire could not destroy the Devil's Bible. Today, the Codex Gigas remains preserved in Stockholm, where it continues to fascinate historians, scholars, and curious visitors. Despite the legends surrounding it, the manuscript ultimately represents something even more remarkable than a supernatural pact. It represents the dedication of a single human mind, determined to gather knowledge and preserve it for future generations. 8 centuries after its creation, the Codex Gigas still inspires wonder. The Devil's portrait may capture the imagination, but the real story behind the manuscript is far more powerful. It is the story of patience, scholarship, and human creativity. The legend of the Devil's Bible reminds us that extraordinary achievements often inspire extraordinary myths. Yet the truth behind those myths can be just as compelling. If you enjoyed exploring the mystery of the Devil's Bible, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next journey into history's most fascinating mysteries. And if you have your own theory about the Codex Gigas or the legend behind the Devil's Bible, leave a comment below and join the discussion. Here on the Universal Explorer, every mystery is another story waiting to be uncovered.